Morning. I'm glad you're with us. We have Chris Fry with us this morning from Great Cities. We support a couple congregations down in Mexico City. Been looking forward to having him here for a while. Before he gets up to speak, John Grantham's going to lead us in prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you for another day. We thank you for your blessings. We thank you, Father, for the measure of health we each enjoy. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather here this morning in this class. We pray, Father, you'll bless each of us. Help us, Father, to block out worldly thoughts and concerns, to focus on your word, to focus on what is said. And we pray, Father, that you will be glorified in all that we do and say today. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, I really am excited to be here, and I appreciate your presence. I appreciate this opportunity to share about my passion. I've never been to this congregation, so I wanted to introduce myself and then also share some about the work that I get to be blessed to participate in. So I was born in West Tennessee in Memphis and moved to South Florida when I was young and raised down there. I went to Freed-Hardeman University, and while I was there, met some friends that became really lifelong friends, like most of us do in college, and we decided we wanted to do mission work. We'd gone on a mission trip, Carrie, and we just really were excited and we had gone to Panama, and so we started talking to the professors there and working, on plans, and this group called Continent of Great Cities came to visit Freed-Hardeman to recruit mission teams to go to certain cities in Latin America. Hey, Beth. And so we met with them because they'd take you out for free lunch, and free barbecue was always a draw for college students. And we began talking and praying and planning, and we graduated in 1999, late 90s, we graduated from Freed-Hardeman. I began working as youth minister in Dyersburg, Tennessee. But we kept meeting and talking and just trying to figure out, does God want us to do this? And we, fortunately, through just planning and prayer, we felt like this was an opportunity we couldn't say no to. So we found in South America, Asuncion, Paraguay. It's the capital city of a small country, Paraguay, about the population of Tennessee, 7 million. I'm not sure if Alabama has a similar population, but a little bit less than that. But Asuncion has a couple million people, and there had only been one American missionary from Churches of Christ who have ever gone there. And so there was a couple real small congregations. They had been asking for more missionaries to come, and so we were blessed to talk with Continent of Great Cities. We formed this team at Freed-Hardeman, and they did the training. They helped us learn Spanish and about the history and culture, also to help devise a strategy and methodology. How are we going to reach people? How are we going to share the gospel in a large city? And so we moved to Texas to train with them for 9 months, and in 2003 we moved to Asuncion, Paraguay. There we learned Spanish and spent a good bit of time learning Spanish. There was 2 couples on our team, myself and my wife, another couple, and then 2 singles, a single guy and a single girl. And in 2004, we planted a congregation in Asuncion. We all had a 5-year commitment, so we were busy with baptisms and just establishing a congregation. And in 2008, some of our team members came back to the States. Our family returned in 2011. We're happy to say that there's still one American missionary lady who has married a Paraguayan who lives down there still. And the church there is about 80, but they've also planted another congregation that's about 30 that's a little further outside the city. So there's about 2 congregations that have been planted through that work. And they're hoping to bring in another preacher and plant another congregation throughout that city on another side in the next year or 2. So we were part of this team and moved back. I actually moved back to Dyersburg and started as the family minister and then the pulpit minister. And Continent of Great Cities had taken off the continent part and called themselves Great Cities Missions because they had expanded beyond South America. And they were looking for somebody to work with Hispanic mission teams. So we were kind of a North American mission team where we formed from English speakers to go to a Spanish-speaking country. But they had started working with Baxter Institute in Honduras of forming teams with Hispanic preachers. And they were looking for someone to help organize that work. And so that's what I started in 2014, working with Great Cities Missions. And so that's my primary role and purpose, is to help form teams. Now, I don't have a clicker. If we can go to we have pictures, if you do a missions presentation, we we'll need pictures, and these screens are so nice. I hope to share some of what I get to do. But our whole role is planting congregations in larger cities throughout South America, hopefully in trying to find areas where there isn't much presence of our fellowship, of the churches of Christ. And so Asunción, Paraguay was a great target city. We found other places in Colombia, in a place where you all have worked with us, in northern Mexico City, one of the top 5 largest cities in the world, over 20 million people in that whole area. And the northern side is where everybody's moving, and when we went in there to ask about planting churches, when we talked to other churches of Christ, because we didn't want to come in and say, hey, there's already a strong congregation here. We don't want to plant another one right next door. Where do you guys see us planting churches that will not interfere with your existing works? And they said the whole northern side of Mexico City. And so that was about 10 years ago when work started there. And so our role is through planting congregations, because Jesus focused on building his church, didn't he? Jesus said that the gates of Hades, or the gates of hell, would not stand against his church. And so our role as an organization that's under the eldership of the Central Church of Christ in Amarillo, Texas, is to help find missionaries, preachers, groups. We like, especially in Latin areas, we like a team to go, because what we found in Latin American missions is when there's just one person, like a preacher, that starts a church, which is great, that's happened in a lot of places, but it's hard to get to a plurality of elders, because the church sees that one example of that preacher all the time, and these new Christians in 10, 15 years, it's still hard to get to where our goal is, local leadership and a plurality of elders and deacons. And so we have found that if we start with a group that works well together, that trains up leaders, they see kind of built into the DNA of that congregation, they then see, yes, this is how leaders in the church lead the congregation, and that's how we can train up and raise elders. Now, it's not 100%. This is what God gives the increase. But in our experience, that has been a plus. And so we have focused on 2 to 3 to 4 families, or men. Sometimes they're singles, but most of the time they're married couples that come in, and we can plant congregations through those groups. So, interesting fact is about 55% of our world population lives in urban areas, and that's by 2050 is going to hit about 70%. So, and when we look at Latin America, we have some of the largest cities in the world. Mexico City being one, Sao Paulo, Brazil being another, Buenos Aires, Argentina. These are over 15 million, sometimes 20, 25 million people in these areas. And we, in Mexico City, we may have had about 500 to 600 members of the church before some of the church plants that we were a part of went in there. So there's a lot of opportunity. And if you notice some of the letters you have in your New Testament, a book like Ephesus or Corinth, the books that went to the churches in those areas were from Paul, because he focused on these large cities and he evangelized in these large cities. Even, you might say, Rome. I know he ended up there, but the Romans that huge city could influence, the church there could influence throughout that region. And so as Paul concentrated on establishing these churches, we see that in a lot of the areas that we're trying to go as well. So while there are lots of opportunities for rural and missions outside of cities, and it's not either or, it's both and, but we feel like there's a lot of opportunities in these large cities with a lot of people to plant congregations so that they can reach their regions, either their states or their nations. And so what we do, we serve missionary teams sent to Portuguese and Spanish-speaking areas. Now, I will say, if you have a question, if you want to ask me anything, please raise your hand. I'm going to go through a lot. I cover a lot. Sometimes my tongue gets going too fast, so please feel free to raise your hand or to say, hey, what do you mean by that? But I want you to feel like you're informed. I want you to be encouraged, because this is a collaboration together. We're partners in establishing congregations, and as many of you walked in, I noticed you were putting your contribution in there. That goes to some of the things you're going to see. And so I hope that you will be encouraged and really be excited about what we get to do together. So one of the roles that we see with great cities is I'll show this diagram. That's our role to missionary teams in Spanish-speaking countries and Portuguese-speaking countries, where we have missionaries in sponsoring churches, and we want trying to help them get to the mission field. And we feel like we're kind of just a catalyzer for that, or catalyst, where we're trying to connect supporting churches with missionaries. And so what I do a lot of times is this type of thing, where I'm sending, Brian gets a lot of reports that the missionaries send me. Sometimes I have to translate those if they don't know English very well. And then I also talk to the churches if there's a need, or we sometimes organize trips to visit down there. So I do a lot of just facilitating the relationship between our mission churches and our sponsoring churches so that it's a smooth and easy transition. Sometimes, and one of the biggest things is just the language barrier sometimes. And so a lot of our congregations may not have a Spanish speaker in their congregation. And so what I do is just help, facilitate. We did some Zoom calls back in January where we were looking at the past year and the year going forward. And so we try to connect and make sure that everything's communicated well and doing well together. So as a ministry, we've been a part of over 40 mission teams. We're probably at a 45, 46, but I just say over 40. There are over 250 churches of Christ that have been planted through our ministry, through the teams that have gone, and over 10,000 Christians meeting this morning. Well, hopefully, depending on what country and their level of restrictions. But I have come to know Christ through the work that we get to do. So I'm very excited. I'm very proud to be a part of Great Cities Missions. We feel like we're still just on the cusp of so much more. We've existed for over 40 years as an organization, basically out of a need from some missionaries in Brazil saying, hey, we need to try to get more people to come down here and spread the gospel. And so that's what we get to do. Now, over the last year and a half, it's looked a lot like this Zoom picture that I'm about to show you. Unfortunately, I didn't get to visit most of our teams until just last month. Last month, I went to Mexico and Colombia, and I was trying to cram in some trips. I got another trip in 2 weeks back to Colombia to another one of our works, where we're finally kind of catching up on a lot of missed things. Many of our groups, unfortunately, have gone to Zoom worship services, and still, in Mexico, for example, I was telling Tim and Brian this morning that they were able to meet again. They kind of had a red light. They had a green, yellow, orange, and red. It was like their, system of saying when you could do things. And I think when they hit of course, green, they could meet. I think when they hit yellow or maybe even orange, they could meet with certain restrictions. But unfortunately, they've had to go back in Mexico back to meeting just virtually. And so that's been challenging because, some of their members are still new Christians, and there's, just that encouragement that we need. Most of us realized how important our presence is in services when this pandemic hit, right? We've been saying that for years and decades, that, hey, you need to be a part of an active, vibrant church family. You need to be meeting, worshiping God. But not everybody believed that until we got stuck in our homes for months, and so hopefully that convinced a lot of folks. But in the Latin world, that has been extremely evident, and so it's been challenging. And one of the things I did just going to Mexico a couple weeks ago was just to meet with our guys and say, I just need to be with you. We've had all these virtual calls. We've had all this stuff online, but I just want to sit down. I want us to just talk about, your challenges, talk about what you're trying to go through to go forward, to kind of get back new Bible studies, get your ministry strong again, how you're getting past some of the virtual things you've done to more in-person meetings. And so that's what we've been able to do, and hopefully we'll keep going in that direction. But the church can't be stopped, right? I mean, the kingdom of God is much stronger than any type of pandemic, any virus, anything that's going to try to enclose us. And so the church, one of my favorite things that happened in the pandemic when it really went lockdown in Colombia, one of our works, their goal that year was 40 baptisms, Carrie, and they had all these plans. They had this doctor that was in the church. They were going to do a monthly medical campaign in a different neighborhood every month and generate new contacts that way. And all of a sudden, they had done one in February, and all of a sudden, March, just everything shut down. And I remember them going, well, I don't know if we're going to, we had this goal. We can't name the number of baptisms, but we're shooting for a number of studies that will hopefully get this number of baptisms. And all of a sudden, all those contacts were wanting to study the Bible through WhatsApp and through Zoom. In the first 10 weeks of the lockdown, they had a baptism of at least one person, sometimes multiple people every week. And so I kept telling everybody, I was like, hey, we're not able to meet, but this work, they are baptizing people every single week because people realize, okay, well, this is, their lives, there's more to life. There's more to life, right? A relationship with Jesus is so much more important. And so their goal was surpassed last year. They had they had 44 baptisms last year. And half the year, the ministers had special letters to get out of the house, but the women and the children, they weren't allowed. They had a 1 kilometer radius that they couldn't leave the house unless they had to get necessities, because they only wanted the men to go get grocery stores and all that. I mean, there was a lot of very strict rules. And they were allowed to have baptisms because of the freedom of religion in Colombia. So that was a good thing. I want to talk about a work that y'all support is the Citara Church of Christ in Huehuetoca. Now, some of our supporters call this way out there. And so I apologize for the translation on that. I understand her pain over here because I translate a lot from English to Spanish. So I appreciate the good work she's doing. But sometimes when I say slang or things like that, I know it's a challenge for her to translate. I have a map here to show you where that's at. These 4 stars are where we're working in Mexico City. The top one is Huehuetoca. Now you see at the bottom, that's downtown Mexico City. And so from that downtown to that top star, right there is, if you're lucky without traffic, it's about 2 hours. And with traffic, it's about 4. And so it's a distance. Now, that area they chose because they built these huge neighborhoods, basically 10,000 homes in a neighborhood, but they're like row houses. They're little small townhouses is might a good comparison, where they're selling and people are buying them because the government has promised to provide the public transportation all the way to Huehuetoca. So these neighborhoods started, and when that started it's almost been 10 years now, there was the promise of this transportation. Unfortunately, the Mexican government, surprise, has not come through with that. And so a lot of folks, when these huge developments grew, they bought houses, and then they realized this transportation issue was a big challenge because they had to take a small bus or taxis and all these different ways. And so it has been a big challenge. But they have been in this area. There's 2 10,000 house neighborhoods basically connected. And they have like little supermarkets in them and small schools and restaurants. If you can work in that area, it works. But if you have to go to Mexico City, it's a challenge. Anyways, they're the only congregation, well, really only there's no other denominations there that I know of. They are it. And so they've been fairly successful reaching a lot of people, but it has been challenging because of the distance. And so that area was our third church plant. On the far left there, the Cuautitlán Izcalli, that was the first church plant from Great Cities mission team. And they're between about 80 and 100. They named elders a few years ago, but one of the elders had to move away. And then another one kind of had some health issues, so they don't have elders at this point, but they're hoping to name some elders here within the next year or so. The 1 star there in the middle, that is in a city called, and it didn't show up on my map, but that is called Ecatepec, and that's probably been one of our strongest works in Mexico City. That team, and you're going to see some pictures of them here in a minute after we get through Citara, but that team has also worked with the far right, Ecatepec, which was our newest team and a work that you guys help us begin. But that team made some big mistakes, unfortunately, and sometimes this happens where they make some more errors. And so, unfortunately, that team was sent home. And so the team at Ecatepec there at the middle star has been sending missionaries over to preach and carry on that work. And they've just recently, 2 of the families have moved over there to work in that permanently. So let's talk about Citara for a second. Let's go to this next slide. This is a picture of the team there. Really great team. I love these guys. This was during I think this was 2 years ago when I visited with them. You'll show this next slide too, is when we sit around and we do basically going through all their ministries, all their ways they're generating contacts and evangelism, because this is what it's about generally. You need a way to meet new people. You need and when you meet those people, you've got to have something that you can connect them to studying the Bible, And so either that's a marriage ministry, children's program, whatever, to set up the personal Bible studies, and then hopefully they're baptized and are integrated in the congregation. Now, the great thing about these guys is they're very evangelistic. So they meet people on buses and in the streets, and they're setting up Bible studies right away. We do and I'll have a couple pictures. We do a retreat for these missionaries, and it's basically just for them to renew their relationship with God. And during this retreat, we've done it at a hotel, and we've had missionaries setting up Bible studies with the hotel staff during free time of our renewal retreats. That's how evangelistic a lot of these guys are. It's really encouraging. I've been in elevators before where they just start talking to people, and it's like, hey, do you know Jesus? What do you think about Jesus? What do you think about the Bible? And all of a sudden they're having conversations. And so it's very encouraging to me to do better in my personal life of how I come into contact with people. This next slide just shows you where they're meeting. I wanted you to see that to give you, just because you probably haven't seen this, they meet upstairs. Below are kind of these shops. And you can see there it says the Church of Christ there in Spanish. They've been meeting there for, I think, about, it's been 6 or 7 years. This congregation, they met under a tent for the first couple years because there wasn't a good place for them to meet. And the weather there is perfect for that kind of thing. Here's a picture of the inside. I wanted you to see kind of where they meet. Again, this is pre-pandemic. I've got pictures here because I like them before we had the masks and everything. So this was when we visited there, probably right before the pandemic hit in 2019. We were there. So it's a great, active, vibrant congregation. They're really working on, and this is what our biggest challenge for our established churches is. They're good at getting growth and getting new folks in the building and building up a congregation. But the challenge is having responsible, committed, faithful men and women to take on the role of leadership of, okay, when this missionary team is going to hopefully step away, and we hope that's part of the plan in the next 3 to 4 years, is hopefully they begin stepping away so that the local leaders will take the leadership. The problem is I know most of us are strong in our faith and we're active in the church, but after 5 or 6 years, still some of these folks are not there yet, and they didn't grow up with Bible knowledge, and they still are, VBS stories that we've heard our whole life, some of them can be new to these folks because they grew up in a Catholic culture that didn't teach the Bible very much. And so this team in Citara is trying and has a group of men that they meet every Saturday night. They have a women's ministry that's very active every other Saturday. And so they're really training up men. And the problem, and I had this too when I was in Paraguay, is you invest so much into people. And you train and teach, and you have, after evangelistic studies, they have usually a 39-week kind of doctrine and discipleship study so that you can help people understand, okay, what's the New Testament? What does biblical leadership look like? What is the spirit worship in spirit and truth? All the basics that we understand. And you invest all that time, and then, their family is Catholic and says, hey, if you keep going to that church, we're not gonna talk to you anymore, and they stop coming, and it's like, and it's just so challenging because it's real life, sacrifices sometimes to be a member of the church there. And so they've been working. I feel like they will have a group of men that is responsible. I don't know if they'll be able to name them elders and maybe a few deacons, but they will have a group of men that will be able to take on the leadership of this congregation in the next few years. And so that's what they've really been investing in. I've got a few pictures here that I wanted to show you. When the pandemic hit, a lot of people there were working daily and lost sources of income. So the church there, and what a lot of our Mexico churches did was their offering they took and they bought food and they distributed food. So this is some of the pictures to just people that needed food, and there was a few donations we received, and we passed those along and tried to help out with a lot of the congregations in Latin America. We ended up helping probably 15 to 20 churches because we just kind of kept getting donations, not just in Mexico, I'm talking about all over Latin America, where they were buying food because all of a sudden there was no income. If you're earning daily wage selling, for example, let's say you sell coffee on the street on a corner, or you have a little fruit stand, and all of a sudden nobody's going to work anymore. There's nobody walking by to buy that. the income dropped off. I mean, just totally. And so we saw that a lot. Here's another picture of just food distribution and just even, I don't think it has any of those pictures, but some of those you'll look, they're like that top right one, there's toilet paper right there. Some of it was just personal hygiene products that were sometimes pretty expensive for folks to buy. And so that was just something that we helped, and their churches help them do. And we love when we see the local church, and this is part of what Great Cities does. We try to do everything through the local church. We may get an opportunity, for example, to start, we've had other organizations approach us about starting an orphanage or start a ministry to rescue trafficked children. And we're definitely open to that, but we try to have a local congregation take on that leadership. Rather than as Great Cities saying, hey, we're just going to establish this in this area, we really try to work through local churches. We still believe and want that to be the focus. And so one of the things that was really exciting, started right before the pandemic in August of 2019, was a soccer ministry. And we have a couple pictures here. So in this big, huge complex of these houses, the developer put parks. And they looked really good when they were building the houses. Unfortunately, they didn't have HOA or anybody to maintain them, and when the builder moved out and was done building the houses, they just fell in disarray. And so they have these, nice tables and everything. Now this looks pretty good because some friends of our ministry said, hey, we want to start helping your congregations have maybe creative ministry outreach. Like not your typical door knocking or typical Bible studies, but what's something that in their community they could do that we would help start for them, and they would get new contacts and new people. Well, one of the things, I don't know if you've ever heard of, I think it's called Upward here. It's a sports ministry that sometimes other denominations use, like basketball or baseball, and it's kind of like a Christian-based sports league. And so we kind of looked at that, and we knew soccer was really big in Latin America, and in some areas, the kids don't have anywhere to play. And so this park had been built by the developer, but had been in disarray. So they presented to these friends of our ministry, hey, we want to repaint this entire park. We want to clean it up. We want to have a soccer school and a soccer league where we invite other soccer teams. And so that's what they did. That's why this looks so good. They repainted all of it. And if we go to, here's another, all the kids right there on the basketball court, but they also use that for soccer. And this ministry's been really exciting. One of the brothers that they converted, they baptized a guy who was a karate black belt. And so one of those pictures, I think the first one you saw, or maybe it's this next one here. Let's go to this next picture here. And so you'll see right there, the guy in the red shirt, he's kind of doing a punch. And he started a free karate classes on Saturday mornings. And there's not many kids in that picture, but there's about 20 or 25 kids in that program. And if you'll notice, the parents sit there and watch. And so then the missionaries on Saturday mornings, they go and they sit and they meet with the parents and they start talking about the church, talking to them about relationship with God and what it means to be a Christian. And they've had a number of families and baptisms. Now, unfortunately, this started about for 4 months, and then the pandemic just chopped it for about a year. They started it back up some this year, and then, like I was telling you, they've had to roll back some. But they have about 45 kids enrolled right now in the soccer school. What's really been successful is they had enough money to fix the lights. And so they put the lights back up. And the city, since they did all this work to this park that was kind of public, nobody maintained, but the city gave our mission team the exclusive rights to get who uses that field now. And if somebody wants to practice on it, they have to organize with our soccer ministry. And so they've had over 40 teams from all over that area. They have a women's league, a men's league, a children's league from I think 8 to 12 years old, and then a teen, 13 to 18 years old league. And they've had about 10 teams in each of those leagues. And it's just been unbelievable. And so the leagues, they have prayer before and after every game, and in the practices they give devotionals and they teach. And then the parents and the families have been coming to church, which has been a great thing because it's sometimes easy to reach maybe one member of the family, the wife or the husband. But this has been kind of drawing entire families to the congregation. And so it's been so successful at this church that y'all support. One of the other works is Cali that I showed you that y'all aren't supporting directly, has just started another soccer program with these same supporters. And so it's been really, really exciting. Here's just a picture of some of the kids in the class from the church there that, that are learning about God. And so, it's amazing how, you can have so many different ways to reach people. And this is something in their community very close to the church building that has just been a huge, huge benefit. So I would like to say, is there any questions? I'm going fast. Anybody have any comments or questions on that? That church is a church y'all supported, I think, since the beginning, Carrie, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I took over afterwards, so I wasn't been around, but I've been very proud of that team. They've adjusted well through, this pandemic and the challenges. All of our teams have done really well with, once everything went online, they started doing every single morning, daily, they record a devotional. Some of them have 2 to 3 times a day prayer time where everybody stops and praise. It's been good in that sense. This congregation, they divided up. I didn't say this, but they took the men in that leadership group and they divided the whole congregation because it's about 80 or so. And so they each took like 6 to 8 members of the church, and they were in charge of calling them and encouraging them every week. And so it really helped the men be better leaders, but it also helped the church stay connected when everybody couldn't meet. So much like what y'all did. Mm-hmm.
A 5-year plan for most. Do you extend them a year or two at times, or replace them with somebody else for a few years? Or
That's a great question. Carrie was asking the 5-year plan. It's been a 7-year plan with these, or 7-year commitment. One of our families on the team in Citara they finished their commitment last year, but they've stayed there as part of the church, and they're working in a secular job. Danilo and his family, who was supported by Brentwood Hills in Nashville. And so one of the families is there. Now, the soccer ministry got kind of so big that they added another family that the soccer ministry supports. His name is Serapio. He's also a graduate of Baxter and has, I think, 2 or 3 kids. And so they've kind of, some come and go. But we do extend that and ask the congregations to extend the support until we can have just a good, strong leadership. And fortunately, the pandemic's helped in some ways and hurt in some ways. Like I said, the guys that were involved stepped up to be even more involved, but some have fallen away a little bit too. So that's a good question. Any other questions? Our original mission team, for the North Americans, it's been a 5-year commitment. For the Hispanics, it's been a 7-year commitment. It's kind of the way we've structured that. So the next congregation that I wanted to mention is the Las Americas Church of Christ, another church that y'all have helped us to start. It was the newest Mexico City work, my first team, and it was really a heartbreak because, like I said, the team, we do a lot. I don't want to go into all the details because it'll bore you, but we do a lot on the front end with these guys and these families to make sure they're healthy. So they fill out 10 different areas of applications: a family history, a spiritual autobiography, their work and education history. They do a lot of that to before they apply with us to be a team. They also take a host of different assessments or evaluations, psychological and personality-wise. So we look at like their strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has those. That's okay. We just want to make sure that they don't have serious conflicts. Once they do that, we do what we call a clinical interview, where our director of care will take all that information and develop an interview. We just finished a whole week of that with one of our new teams we're working on for Columbia just this last week. We did it all virtually. And once they get through the interviews with the team in Las Americas, we did what we call a quest, which is a 2-day seminar where we kind of put the team in like stressful, they have to do these stressful activities together. Like, okay, we finish at 8 o'clock at night. We have this really hard project that we want you to do, and it's due by tomorrow. And we want you to present it. So they get like 3 hours at night before they go to bed to try to work together to present something while they've just been through a whole day with us. And so we did that quest, and the team came through, and then everything looked great. And so then they get on the field, and within 2 months, we had a lot of conflict. And so we make multiple trips. This is 2017. Make multiple trips down there. We have all these different things we can do, tools, and we get them in a better spot. A month later, same thing. At some point through the year, they stopped communicating with me. This happened kind of in April or May of 2017. Through the summer, we worked with them. In the fall, it really blew up, and so we took a trip down there with some of our elders of the overseeing churches, and we met with them, and we discovered that they had made some very bad decisions. Just mishandling of finances, basically. And so we felt like the entire team made this mistake, and they were all asked to stop working with that. Well, we had a brand new church plant, and what do? Well, one of our most successful teams, if you go to this next slide, it shows that map again. I just wanted, well, okay, there's our successful team right there. Ecatepec had really close to naming elders, and we knew that they could handle sending, every Sunday, one or two of their members to handle just to keep that congregation going and to, go over there a couple times a week and evangelize. And so that's what they've been doing for the last 4 years. And this team is just we love this team. The next picture is the 4 of these guys. And I show you this because the 2 guys on the right, the 2 shorter guys, they've moved now to Ecatepec just this summer to focus on this Las Americas congregation. And the other 2 guys are still there, and they hope to name elders by next year, actually. They have a phenomenal group of leaders there. We've met with them virtually. I've met with them there. They've been studying with Calvin. They've studied with a lot of we've connected them with elders here in the States, what that means to be a shepherd and pastor and to lead a congregation. And so we feel like those 2 guys are going to be able to name the elders within the next couple years. The tall one, Oscar, is going to start another congregation in Mexico City. And then the shorter one, Juvenal, on the far left, he's going to join the other 2 in Las Americas, and they're going to do the same thing. They're going to evangelize and get that congregation strong. So I wanted to show you a couple pictures of the church that they first worked with, Ecatepec. This is their garage where they had their service, and they've been averaging, before the pandemic, close to 200. Really strong, good congregation. This is they raised funds and they built a building, and this is the parking garage, the first level. This next picture is kind of just from the side. They've since put on another level, but I don't have good pictures that are high resolution, so I just let you see that. But it's going to have the second level will have their auditorium, and then the back half of the second level will have a third level, which will have classroom space. And they'll also partition some of this garage for classrooms as well, because they don't have as many cars, obviously, but they need some parking for their code in Mexico City. So this team has just done a phenomenal job, and really we knew that they could handle this other work in Las Americas. And so here's a couple of the baptisms they had. This is where they would baptize in Las Americas, the little baptistry that they use, kind of like this big tub, and they've had. The pandemic has slowed that down a little bit, unfortunately, but they're really starting to pick back up with their new contacts and studies because the 2 guys have moved there and really are full-time there. So we're excited to see where that church goes. Here's a picture of the Las Americas congregation in their current building. It's a little elongated because I was trying to stretch it out and everything, but they have room there for probably 50 if they squeeze everybody in. They are having to practice a little more social distancing, so it doesn't quite look like that because that's pre-pandemic, but anyways, they have a good facility. It's a really great location, easy to get to. It's one of the things we try to teach our teams is, public transportation is so crucial, so we want them to be in an area that is accessible, and that's been one of the keys to their success of reaching, in just a few years, to have a congregation of pretty good size. So here's our 4 church plants in Mexico City. Izcalli, the oldest one, is about 80 members. The Ecatepec is about 180 to 200. Huehuetoca is about 100, and Ecatepec is about 40. And so I wanted to share and just give you those. Any questions you have on those congregations? Mexico City, we feel like in that northern area, we could plant a dozen more congregations, and it still would just be the tip of the iceberg. Yes, sir?
What are some of the denominational teachings and tendencies that the new converts have to overcome?
Mostly it just comes out of some of the Catholic tendencies. The Virgin Mary, a high, like praying to the Virgin Mary and the emphasis on the Pope and the Virgin. That's something we run across all the time. Sometimes the tendency is, and we do convert people that have gone from Catholicism to like a charismatic movement of speaking in tongues and things like that because they wanted more, but then when they learn the truth, they get baptized in our congregation. And sometimes it's kind of some reteaching on that of, okay, well, that was a first century sign to confirm the word, but we don't have that today. And so those are the 2 probably most common things. Sometimes you just hear some, the wealth and health is common, I guess. That's probably the third, which is, the more faithful you are, the more wealth God's going to give you. We have that some here in the States, where it's just, where you're looking to just physically and materially get more. So we run into that, and if it doesn't happen where they were taught or heard from another congregation, they may leave, or not congregation, from another denomination. So I'd say those are probably the top three that I can think of offhand. It's a good question, though. What other questions you may have? Yes.
Have you ever met any deaf people in any of these works?
Yes, we have. In Paraguay, we had a few that had visited with us. Unfortunately, we didn't have the capabilities of translation for sign language. But what work is it? I think one of our works, it's not one of our works, a work in Cuba I know of a work that's very active with deaf ministry. And it's really neat to see and to be a part of that.
There is a deaf preacher in Mexico City that I know of.
Oh, really? Wonderful. Well, I would love to get that email or contact from that person just to connect, because we always want to be able to reach everybody if we can.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Great question. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love the interaction. I know this can be a lot of information, and you're like drinking from a fire hose here. I wanted to share a little bit of a few of the other works that I get to be a part of, just because I get so excited, and I have a few. I got like 2 minutes. Okay, the warning bell hasn't gone yet. I wanted to say we are working in Cuba. Artemisa was my latest church plant until this year. This was right before the pandemic, and here's a little map of Cuba. Havana's there in the top middle, and then there's the warning bell. So we'll wrap up here in a minute. But this to the left is Artemisa at that star, and to the right is Guines. That's only about an hour and a half drive. Each of those, you can see, kind of forms almost like a triangle. It's kind of blown up. But Artemisa is one of our newest works. And I mention that because I would ask you to especially pray for the Cuban churches. There are probably at least 150 to 200 churches of Christ through the island of Cuba. Now, they're mostly house churches because the Cuban government doesn't allow us to set up a building like we do in Mexico. But they do allow house churches to begin, and we started one in Artemisa. And the pandemic has just wreaked havoc on that island. It already had a bad system of socialism and just the government, the way it's run. But it has just gotten worse, where inflation and even where we're trying to get support. You know, we can send support to Mexico or Colombia easily. To Cuba, we have generally taken it in as cash, and we can't do that right now. And so we can't send it real easily either. So just to pray for our Cuban churches and members of the church there. It's just really, really challenging. This is our team. I'll just go briefly through there. They're just actually cousins and just a wonderful two families. They work really well together. The next picture is from our Guines team, their baptistry that they made, and somebody being baptized by a brother named Os Bell. And then this next picture is kind of a picture of a house church. This is kind of what it looks like. You know, there's just not a lot of space. Generally, the preacher will make the living room kind of into the church, and then they'll have either a bedroom upstairs and behind it to where it's like their personal residence, but it's not very big. We can grow them to about 50 or 60, and then we've got to do more. So that's just a real challenge in Cuba. Let's go ahead. You'll see some pictures of the food distribution we did there, and then our two congregations there in Cuba. Guines has 20, and Guines has 40, and Artemisa has 20. I wanted to talk about Cucuta, Colombia. This is a work that was begun in 2016, and this team has just really done a phenomenal job. You can see this next slide is the picture of their congregation. They're close to 200 as well. They're extremely evangelistic, and they've also done a huge outreach to Venezuela. I'd say also pray for our Venezuelan churches. Again, the product of bad, corrupt government. And so they have started an outreach to sending food and medicine into Venezuelan churches of Christ. We've helped almost 100 churches of Christ throughout Venezuela through this team and this work. They like to do their baptisms in the river out there, which is really neat. Go to the map there and you'll see where they're located. Cucuta is on the border with Venezuela. So when that congregation was started, we realized we had a huge opportunity to help our Venezuelan churches. So I just ask you, pray for those Christians in those countries. Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate your attention and your presence.